So far in my channel, we've talked a lot about the how-to of how to use the software, how to get to a certain creative output. In this video, I want to talk about the why. Let's go! When it comes to creating motion design, tactics are great to learn, but it's not all about the tactics. We want to get into the why. Why are we executing in a certain way to advance the story? And so I want to take this opportunity to showcase some of the decisions that I made with a piece that I did with Backcountry. So let me first talk you through the brief that I received. It's a behind the scenes video for the WHITESPACE product launch. So the team I worked with at Backcountry was fantastic. They took care of the creative direction. They had some graphic design elements and product drawings that I could take and leverage. They had also been on location for a shoot, and they shot the footage, compiled it, colored it, and put it in a timeline. So by the time it got to me, I had a Premiere Pro project in hand with a locked edit. So they delivered me a lot of assets, and it was up to me to turn it into a motion design narrative. So let's jump into After Effects, and I'm going to show you how to import that Premiere Pro project so you can get up and running. What I did from taking a Premiere project to bring it into After Effects is I went up here to File, Import, and import Adobe Premiere Pro project. And that allowed me to import all the different assets as they were laid out on the timeline. And that was my starting point. And to give you a sense of what that looked like, let me just scrub through this rough outline here. It's the logo up front, needs to say behind the design, and by Backcountry. That's where people are going to be able to purchase this gear. And then we get into a lot of interview assets, and it's basically the storyline. And then they also provided me a ton of assets, like this name here, and the handwritten look and feel. And I also received some raw footage that they had shot along with this as well. Let me scrub through. Yeah, so there's a look at some of the drawings and different things that they provided as well from their initial concepting phases, which was super helpful, and I included it all over the place. So I have a lot of this well shot, well lit footage showcasing the product and the look. So let me hop into my final version here, and I'm going to skip over the intro here because that's not where I actually started animating. As the intro of the piece, I I knew it had to fit with the rest of the piece, and it's not the first thing I wanted to animate because I wanted to see what worked and what didn't work as I went through the whole piece. So I actually started in this general area. There was a lot of interview footage, and I knew that that was going to be a central element here. So I wanted to tackle that first. And the way that I approached this was to center cut the interview. And I added the stroke back here behind it because throughout the piece, they talk about layering and taking things off the mountain and, being able to unzip or rezip a certain element into a coat so that you can still perform and you can still have comfort. So I tried to incorporate those elements into the interview by adding this stroke in the background. The handwritten element I used and I brought on in handwritten fashion, and then I went into Photoshop and hand animated all of these arrows and those elements to playback as well to fit with the look and feel and the style. And you can see some of the elements here in the background that were provided from the product mockups. So for this transition, throughout the whole piece, I use this black to alpha to black transition. And if I go back to the beginning here, their logo is black, white, black, and stripes. And it can either be stripes vertically or horizontally. They've used it both ways. So when I went to go do this transition, I tried to mimic that black white logo with the wipe. So as the white comes on, it's black first, then it goes to white. Try to step through this. So this is the white, and then it goes back to black to reveal the interview. And the other thing I tried to do here was, again, this is a behind the design decision video. So when he's talking about the product, I intentionally put the product here, and then I made sure his face was in about in the same spot. So this is essentially a look at him talking about the product and a wipe of the product of him in the product over to him continuing to talk about the product. I'm animating with the intention of advancing the story and not just animating for the sake of animating. So again, here I have the stroked outline here as the layer. I have more layers here in the background. So this blue background is actually something that they shot against here. So you can see this blue in the background here. They had a shot, a clean plate essentially of just the mountains by themselves. So that is what I used here, and then this image is used as an overlay with that blue background just to reinforce that these are the black and white stripes, the white space that we're talking about snowboarding. It's just a subtle element there in the background, so it's coming across here with this transition as well. So right here, he's talking about what you wear on the mountain, you can take off the mountain.
Really excited me was the idea that everything that you take onto the mountain, you could really take off of the mountain.
So I circled what he's wearing on the mountain, and my transition here is in a downward motion with the arrow. It's like you're coming off the mountain, and that's what I'm reinforcing that talking point with that arrow. So it's saying take what you're wearing on the mountain and take it off. So that's why I made the move here as I did, and then also incorporated the product drawings in the background because that's what he's talking about is saying, hey, you can wear this even when you're not on the mountain. And then we go through a couple of flashes here of the different types of product that that will be available. That was the first area that I tackled, and it really set up a lot of the decisions that I made later on with the transitions and the look and the feel of how I brought things on. All right, so you can see how I decided to ultimately animate that white space logo, and I'll come back and talk about that decision later on. So this tape element was also something that was provided because it's a behind the scenes piece. Was used to tape up the look of the product and different things, and it was the direction that they wanted to take this in, combined with the handwritten look and feel here. So I animated this on in a way to make it feel like it fits with the hand drawn elements. It's coming on. It doesn't just land. So it comes on like tape is being pushed down on the canvas, so to speak. We have our animated arrows here, reinforcing the form meets function, form over here, function over here. And then because we're meeting in the middle, my transition starts from the middle and goes out and reveals more of the product. And as we get into a little bit more of how things got started, I use this sample background to help illustrate that we're going into a new scene and we're going to be talking about the development of the product. And it's the beginning of the journey for the product line. So we start tight and then introduce Jesse White, who is Sean's brother and the creative director for the product. So just using, you can see the A and B here. This is kind of where everything starts. And we highlight his question of what do you actually need, because they weren't going to have a huge product line. They wanted to start with the basics, and hence again the samples here. And my transition here zooms out, and I'm using the same look here, and it's just turned on its side because they use it both ways, horizontally and vertically. So I use that as my transitional element and use that to reinforce the fact that this is a product line, and their logo matched perfectly with the fact that it's a line. So I use that as my transitional element to zoom back out, showcase some of the product, showcase the where things came from, the initial drawings, the in the background, and showcase what the drawings turned into in actual form. So as we're going along here, we're highlighting some different elements, some different details within the product and the different product offerings, from coat to snowboard to pants. I stole my colors here from the background sky palette and stood out, and I pushed up the contrast here with the paper. I really tried to accentuate that to give it a little bit more of a tactile feel. So my arrows here highlight this picture, and we begin to push in on it as I circle it, just to draw attention to what he's talking about. And he says, "These are the staples," as he puts his fist down.
right now. I'm sure we'll expand in the future, but we were like, these are the staples.
And the way I brought these on is their images. So I went into Photoshop and did a content aware fill on these areas and cut them out, and then singled these out, singled out the text and brought them back in. The lines I actually animated separately to make sure that I hit what things look like. Right. And then we come in here and you see the black to white transition again. So he's talking with the stroked background of a layer. We go black, then we show him in the gear in black and white, and then a black wipe to get back to him talking and revealing this product. So essential elements. And you can also see that the background drawing, I tried to line up with the coat itself. So had to plan that out and make sure that the positioning, the timing, and all that came together to help reinforce that this was initially a drawing and this is what it turned into, and it's one of the essential elements. So this transition is something that I used throughout the piece as well. It's a combination of trying to make sure that the drawing piece comes through and feels consistent throughout, and is kind of reminiscent of a snowboard's path. It's not going to be straight. It's not going to cover everything. Kind of jagged. That was my thought process and decision behind that. And then I get into this area where I just want to let the piece breathe a little bit. We've talked a lot about everything that's going on, the background, what we're doing, how it came together, the staples of the product line, showcasing some of the product, and now we just got to let it breathe and let people see what the product looks like just in full screen here. And one of their talking points is disrupt distraction. So I use that as the motivation for these transitions. They're very short. It's like a mini shake here into the blue mountain background.
Still be ready to ride for the competition. And then when it's cold again, I pop that new layer on.
So the first 44 seconds is the intro, and then this is basically the beginning of the second act. And we're talking more about how the product came to be, flying through a lot of the details, and the way that I created this part was I put a mask around the footage, and every couple frames I just moved the mask a little bit just to give it that feeling like the shot was being hand shot as it was floating through all of the details. So it gives it a little bit of a wiggle, which fits with the hand drawn arrows and look and feel that we have throughout the rest of the piece as well. And so if I jump into the split version, because something that I find helpful and useful is reinforcing the look and feel throughout the piece so that things look familiar and the piece just feels more cohesive that way. So if I were to scroll through, this top one is the first part and the bottom one is the second half. So if I scroll through from here, you can see how similar some of these elements are: the transitions, the framing, how things look on the screen. And it doesn't line up perfectly, obviously, because we're talking about some different things. So the timing is a little bit different, but there's enough here that reinforces the look and feel to make things feel in the second half feel familiar and make the story flow better. All right, so let's go back to the beginning because I told you that I didn't animate this first. I actually saved this for pretty much the very end. And the inspiration that I took in animating this is at the very, very end of the piece. He says, "Take what's been done and elevate it."
It's time to take what's been done and elevate it.
And that was the inspiration that I used to animate this. So the introduction of the text. So the first thing you see is white space, and it comes in towards the bottom of the screen so that the lines can push it up. And you can see up here too, we have this fall winter performance collection that comes in as white space is being pushed up because that's what it is. So your eyes will come up and they'll see the fall winter, but it's still not as important as white space. So as it comes in from the bottom of the screen and the black and white striped logo pushes it up, it doesn't just settle into place because what happens when the snowboarder's in the half pipe and they fly up into the air, you see that it's not just like straight up and then it sticks. Like they're flying through the air and still moving, and then they come down and prepping for the land, doing something really freaking cool in the air, right? And so I didn't want the white space just to come up and
You know,
stick
the
and
name
just
really says
land.
it.
I wanted it to be elegant and smooth with a little bit of bounce there. And then I invert to transition to the behind the design, showcasing the snowboard in the air, and then we get into. So that was a behind the scene to give you a sense of some of the decision making that goes on in an animated piece.